Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY. And today, things are a little bit different. I did want to kind of get the motor started for you guys today. I wanted to show you guys how to time your motor. I wanted to do a lot of things. Unfortunately, I have some kind of crummy neighbors. I have no idea which neighbor it was, but unfortunately, they sent in a nuisance complaint because my car was on jack stands in my carport on my property. For more than however many days it's been on jack stands. And because of something that provides zero impact to their life, or for that matter anyone's life except for my own, because this is my own property, I had to work with the city of Charlotte to work through this nuisance violation that they decided to call in on me. Thankfully, the city of Charlotte, I have to commend them. Their inspection officer was incredibly friendly. However, I had to get the car on the ground before Monday. So in the case of what I'm filming right now, today is Sunday, I had to get it back on the ground by tomorrow. Now, that threw kind of a wrench in a lot of the plans I had for this weekend because I wanted to, install my shifter assembly. I wanted to do a lot of other stuff underneath the car. So I have it back down on the ground. And the rule is now that in order to work on the car, I have to lift the car up when I'm working on it, lower it back down when I'm not. According to the inspection officer, the violation technically was that the car was at risk of falling. However, jack stands are literally made to keep the car from falling down, so I don't know. But with that stuff out of the way, I just wanted you guys to know why I wasn't doing an engine startup video this weekend. Things just did not work out. So instead of doing the engine startup this weekend, I'm going to let things kind of simmer down a bit. And we are going to install that compact heater that I started to install on another episode. I have since created a beautiful fancy bracket, which I'll go over in just a minute, to mount this in my Mark I. Also, I'm going to go over one of the kind of basic maintenance jobs that you might have to do on your Classic Mini, especially if the steering rack has never been replaced before. I am going to show you guys how to service your steering rack, add new oil to it. I've already added the boots to it. I got on a kick one day and started working on it and forgot to film it. So I'm going to show you guys the boots that I'm talking about. They're really simple to replace. It just can be a little difficult to get your hands up in there. But first things first, let's start with that steering rack. So let's head out to the car. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now, to start off, the steering rack does what it basically sounds like it should be doing. It does the job of turning your wheels whenever you turn your steering wheel, thus naming it the steering rack. Now, your steering rack is comprised of basically just two components. You have your rod end, and that is the end right here that connects to the end of your hub. And then you have the actual arm that does the job of pulling and pushing that rod and that hub in any particular direction. Now, adjustments done to this hub assembly here and to this rod end are done kind of a trial and error basis. You take the wheel off, you adjust it to a certain level, set the wheel down, and run your toe adjustments. You compare those numbers to the spec, which is pretty much both wheels pointing straight ahead at the same time, and then you adjust these rod ends out or in. Now, looking farther in here, you're going to see that there is a boot on the end of your steering rack. And this steering rack boot can be purchased at 7 Mini Parts. They're super inexpensive, and it's something that you often have to replace on these Classic Minis. These old rubber boots tend to tear and wear down, and then what happens is oil actually leaks out of your steering rack. And then that's what leads to rack failures or really poor play and behavior in your steering rack. Now, you may be wondering, well, if there's oil inside my steering rack and the steering rack is way deep inside my subframe here, how do I even get to that? Do I have to take the whole rack out just to address this? The answer to that is no. It's actually quite simple to address this. All you have to do is jump inside the car. Now, I'll show you guys exactly where you can get to that. All right, so now that we're inside the car here, we are going to get to the service spot for our steering rack. Now, it's actually pretty simple to get to, assuming nobody before you has kind of messed with the flooring or the access to the steering rack nipple. Now, if you have a right-hand drive car, you are going to have to find the nipple on the left side. If you have a left-hand drive car, you're going to have to find it on the right side. Pretty straightforward. So first, what we'll do is peel back our carpet. With our carpet peeled back, we will have access to the subfloor of the car. And as you can see here, I've got a little rubber grommet in here. Now I put that rubber grommet in there. Your car may or may not have this, and if it doesn't, I strongly recommend putting one in there after we're done. And then once you've pulled that rubber grommet out, if you're lucky, you'll be able to access this with an Allen wrench. Now the reason I say if you're lucky is due primarily to the fact that most of these new steering racks, this little nut right here, this little actually bolt right here, is often made out of plastic, and that Allen key strips out almost instantly the first time that you service this thing. So the way I get around this is, if you have plastic, I have already done the job of hammering in a short little flathead screwdriver, and then you should be able to unscrew this bolt pretty simply by spinning that out. And you'll have your bolt. You can set that to the side, and then we're going to have direct access to our steering rack oiling system, as well as our capture system inside this nut. So let's see if I can get a shot of this for you. All right, so unfortunately, I can't get quite a good enough shot down there to show you guys this. When you turn your actual steering wheel, you will bring a small hole down on the actual shaft that runs through your steering rack. You'll expose a small hole. And so this Allen wrench actually is the perfect size to set down into that hole. Now I'm going to turn the wheel a little bit, and as you can see, that's getting caught and not allowed to move. Now what that does is this aids in your setup of, straightening out these wheels right at the beginning. This is going to allow you to fix that wheel straight in the center, and then you can adjust your tie rods to wherever they need to be on your car. Now in my scenario, I have already done this, and it's definitely not perfect. I might do an alignment video on this once we get to that kind of stage of the project, but for right now, I'm going to leave that out. Like I said earlier, when you have those torn boots on your car, what ends up happening is oil leaks out of your steering rack and prevents it from operating the way it should, and can lead to premature wear and failure. So getting down here and doing this is a pretty worthwhile thing to do. Now, I would not say this is something that you need to do every year, but I would definitely at least check those steering boots at least once a year, and if they're torn, replace them and refill this with oil. Now let me grab some oil. I'll show you guys which kind you need. Now, for this job, I use a Valvoline 80W90. This is a gear oil, and from what I understand, this is actually for like diffs and things of that nature, but this actually works great in your steering rack. Now, it also comes with a convenient little filling nozzle, but we are going to want to take a rag, set this down here just in case we get any oil spillage, and it's pretty simple. You just fill this up until it's full. And the easiest way to get more oil into this is to turn the wheel as you're filling it. So fill it up with a little bit of oil, turn the wheel, that'll work the oil into all those nooks and crannies, rinse, repeat until it doesn't take any more oil. You can see there won't be any more air bubbles coming out of it, and then you should be in good shape. And then once that's back in there, you're all done. This is pretty much the whole job of filling up and servicing your steering rack. Now, it would be a good idea to go ahead and check this after probably running the car for a few, maybe 100, 200 miles. Once you've kind of worked that oil down into the different places, you've driven the car around, and it's had an opportunity to work all of that out. It is just worthwhile to go ahead and re-inspect it, make sure nothing's leaking, and then also fill it up a little bit more after that oil's worked its way into all the cracks and crevices down in that steering rack. All right, and with that, we're gonna go ahead and return this carpet to where it was, and we can move on to our compact heater installation in a Mark I Mini, which should be pretty exciting. So let's jump back out of the car, and although the heater is going in here, I want to show you guys a few things in the engine bay so you know exactly what you're doing if you've already got a heater in your car. All right, so first things first, if you guys have got a heater in your car already, you're probably wondering, well, how do I get it out? The first thing you're going to want to do is let your engine cool. If you've recently been running your car, you're going to want to give it an opportunity to cool down, because the heater does have actual engine coolant running through it, so by nature it's going to be hot. So once you've let your engine cool down, the next thing that you're going to want to do is take an opportunity to locate first your heater takeoff, which sits on this side of your head. This is the side that your clutch sits on. This runs up and will run into the bulkhead right over here into a small hole and down into your heater. Then you'll have a second hose that comes out and runs to a connection point right here on the return hose of your radiator. Now, that's the simplest system that you could probably have on your car. If you have a single carb or an HIF 44, something like that, sometimes the heater takeoff will be here. It will run heat. It'll run that coolant into your actual intake manifold in one side, out the other side, down into the bulkhead, and then back out and into this return. So that is probably the more complex scenario that you might run into. Other than that, unless there is some like auxiliary radiator, like on an MPI that runs up front, something like that, it should be pretty simple. Coolant coming out here, going in here. So the key is follow those hoses. Now, installing this compact heater is pretty much identical to actually installing a regular Mark I heater or any heater in any Mini. You're simply going to be connecting those hoses here to your new heater system. Now, when you're removing your old heater system, you're going to want to disconnect both hoses from the inside of the engine bay. And then what I generally recommend doing is taking a wet vac, so like a shop vac that you can suck fluid into, and then taping the vacuum to one end of a hose that's coming out of this bulkhead, leaving the other one open, and suck all of that coolant just out of your heater core. And what that's going to allow you to do is actually pull those hoses down into your car without getting coolant everywhere. And let me speak from experience, take your time and try not to spill coolant, because it's very easy to do. I have spilt coolant inside my car and it smelled sweet and coolanty for like weeks and weeks and weeks. It was awful. So take your time, empty out those hoses, whether it's with a shop vac, some sort of siphon. Don't drink the coolant, obviously. If you are going to siphon it out by mouth, I would not recommend doing that. But once you've got that heater core empty, you work the hoses out and then you unbolt the heater from the inside of your car, taking note of the wires that it connects to so we can connect those to the new compact heater. Now, this next part, I shot a time lapse of cutting a small bracket for that compact heater. And let's jump to that time lapse so you can see how I did that. It's pretty simple though. Used tin snips and some sheet aluminum and just took my time and measured it out. So, enjoy. All right, and so what we're left with here is kind of a bracket system that is going to work in this Mark I Mini. Now, you probably see this black trim molding. I used that on my hood in another episode. I'm really happy with this stuff. If you're interested in using this on any sharp edges on your Mini, I would strongly recommend it. There is a link in my description to this on Amazon. But you'll see here, I've got bolt, 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 and these connect to the actual heater itself, and then you have a hole here, here, and then these two bolts are actually kind of wedged in there. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to tighten these, fingers crossed. But you might see I've got some spacers on here, and that's because these two bolts right here are mounting to a surface that's actually higher than these two bolts back here. Thanks a lot, British Motoring Company. That made it pretty challenging to figure this out, but we got there, figured it out. And these little nylon spacers, just picked them up at a hardware store, can go on there. And then simple bolts go through here, and this should bolt right up. Now you'll also notice I've got my hosing on here already. And I have to replace my hosing because it's not quite the same length as it was before. I didn't actually have a heater installed in my car. because I never used it and it was loud as hell. But this is just some black silicone hosing. I'm thinking I might probably replace this with a blue hosing at some point, just because the rest of the hosing in there is blue. It looks better. But you can see here, this one's long. I've actually pre-cut these already to fit in that space. So we've got a long one and a short one. This is going to go into the return hose on that radiator side. And this one is going to go into the heater takeoff on the actual head. Now, I'm going to do my best to show you guys me installing this, but as you guys know, this is a Mini Cooper. It's small. It's hard to show some stuff, but I'll set up the camera. I'm going to bolt this up, and then for right now, I'm not actually going to wire this up. The battery's not connected yet, and I don't want to connect it all up and then cause some sort of short or something. So for right now, we're going to run this up, connect it to the head, connect it to the radiator housing, and then I will tackle powering this up in a later episode. Don't worry, I won't forget. And yeah, this is going to look pretty good underneath that car, I think. And if any of this is exposed, I might paint this, but fingers crossed it's not going to be visible from the top side. So let's get out there. All right, so that's it for this episode of Classic Mini DIY and the Bad Wolf mini build. We installed that compact heater as well as serviced our steering rack. I hope you guys found this helpful. A big shout out to 7 Mini Parts. They are the ones who provided me the actual compact heater for my Mini. If you're interested in installing one of these on your car, check out 7ent.com, and there are links in the description below to that compact heater if it's something that you think you want to do, you know, before the winter rolls around this year, if you're planning on driving your Mini at all when it's cold. Also, a big thank you to my patrons. If you're interested in becoming a patron on the channel, check out patreon.com/Classic Mini DIY. There's lots of cool perks on that site. Some of the lowest tiers even have like free stickers and other really cool perks for those of you who are interested in supporting the things I do on this channel. But aside from that, that's it for this episode of Classic Mini DIY, and hopefully on the next episode, we'll be starting up that beautiful, new, clean, rebuilt motor. But until next time, enjoy those minis, motor on.